I'm pleased to introduce our next panel, Colorado Tapping into Experienced Employees. It will be moderated by my friend and colleague, Karen Brown, and with panelists, Joe Barela and Katherine Keegan. First, a little bit about Karen Brown. Karen is a thought leader with a zest for all things aging related. She's become an integral part of our Ames, Colorado project since its inception back in 2018. Her work focuses on dispelling myths about hiring older workers, creating awareness of the benefits of the intergenerational workforce, and sharing demographic information that shows the critical importance of engaging older people. So please join me in welcoming Karen Brown and inviting Joe and Katherine up to the stage.
Well, thank you. We actually had Britta Blodgett on the agenda, and she is under the weather today, not feeling well. So Katherine and Joe are going to kind of take the lead on this. Oh, and Katherine's having her love. I was going to say, where did she go? I just saw her. Yeah. So Katherine's going to lead us off with a short presentation, but I'll do a brief introduction of a little bit about Joe's background. Joe was appointed by Governor Polis in 2018 as the executive director of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. That's a 1,400-person state agency housing the divisions of unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, labor standards and statistics, vocational rehabilitation, employment and training, and oil and gas public safety. Joe brings with him more than 25 years of experience in workforce issues, not just in Colorado, but across the nation. He does have a bachelor's in psychology and biology from the University of Colorado Boulder. And excuse me? Go Buffs, sorry. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I didn't include that in the bio, but we'll actually have that on the website, Joe. So you're good there. So in 2019, Katherine Keegan joined the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment as the director of the Office of the Future of Work, leading the state's efforts to raise awareness about the future of work, really thinking a lot about the gig economy, building digital equity, and through the state apprenticeship agency, a relatively newly created organization, expanding access to registered apprenticeships across the state. She has a master's in science from the University of Texas at Austin and a bachelor's of sociology from Boston University. With that, I am going to turn it over to you, Katherine, or Joe, do you have introductory comments and then Katherine?
We're tag teaming everything. So okay. The mic's on. And I think we're just going to sit at the table, if that's okay. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. I was lucky enough to hear Governor do his introduction, and I can tell you he's very passionate about how work plays a critical role and how all Coloradans can have an opportunity to be successful in the communities they choose to call home in Colorado, not only through where they live, but the work opportunities that they have in those communities. So it's great to be with you here today and talk about how we can make sure that every Coloradan, no matter what age they are, has an opportunity to learn and earn throughout their life cycle. And I think, talking about multi-generational approaches, Katherine and I have a history back together. We started at the Markle Foundation with the Skillful Initiative in about 2015, 2016, and really championed the skills-based hiring practices, trying to work with governors, Governor Hickenlooper at that time, Governor Holcomb in Indiana, and other governors, to convert the hiring ecosystem to competencies and skills-based, really seeing that as an opportunity to create more opportunity for more marginalized populations to enter quality career paths that lead to livable or even beyond livable wages. And so when the governor talks about the state of Colorado really looking at skills-based hiring practices, he really means it. What can we do as an employer of over 31,000 individuals make sure that we're not, because of proxies such as experience, years of experience, or education degrees, keep people from the talent pool? The commitment there doesn't stop at the entry gate. We have to make sure that there's not a ceiling put on those individuals once they start with state government, so that they can see promotions not only in responsibility and career trajectory, but wage growth as well. So it's not just a one and done philosophy. It's something that we have to commit to, is where are we putting artificial proxies that prevent people from being successful with the learning and earning models that they can get that through work and in combination with education as well. The governor is very aware that there are value and there is value to people accessing skills through the academic system, but we need to create, if you will, a dual model that gives people through professional experiential learning reach the same plateaus in careers. So we'll go into that a little bit more. It's interesting also to hear about quiet quitting. I think many of you have heard about quiet managing. On the other side, managers who don't provide coaching or professional development, or just it's an easy way to say, if I ignore this worker, they'll leave. So it's happening on both sides, real or not, but there's quiet quitting, quiet managing. So, we all come out of the pandemic and where we are with the workforce situations, not only in Colorado, but globally, from worker shortages, the Great Recession, the Great Career Shift or Reinvention, the Great Sabbatical, the She Session. They're all things that are compiling what we have to deal with talent being available. I really think it opens the doors not only to our mature or older workers, but to all more marginalized populations that haven't seen success in the world of work. As employers, we really need to start looking at what is the skill and competency of the opportunities I have in my workforce, and where can I access that talent? And so I need to look at how I source talent and how I open up talent pipelines to be willing to accommodate that talent pool that's there. So I think you mentioned the divisions that come under the Department of Labor and Employment. It's so nice to be out in public and talk about workforce development, which is my passion and has been for over 25 years. Because of the last 3 years, I've had to focus on unemployment insurance. And so it's so nice to be out in public and talk to you about what I'm passionate about, is how do we make sure that we take advantage, and I mean that in a good way, of every potential worker that's out there and create opportunities rather than create roadblocks to them being the assets that they could be to move Colorado forward, as every industry is struggling to find workers at this point in time. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to talk about, or to give you some data that kind of sets the stage on where we are in Colorado. Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely. So you heard a lot of the data points from Governor Polis. So we're just going to back that up with some bar graphs and line charts to really double down on why this is such an important issue for us before we jump into the panel. So what we see here is from the state demographer's office, looking at the net change in our population. So you have the bar charts being the bar lines being the net change, blue being births, green being deaths, and red being net migration. So as Governor Polis shared, we're expecting and we see that the 65 plus population is going to continue to grow in Colorado, while our under 18 population will decline. I think what's interesting too is if we look at the census results, the most recent census, we see that by 2034, for the first time in our history in the United States, older adults are going to outnumber children in the country. And so as we look at our labor force and how that's changing, it's really an imperative that we engage experienced workers in our talent development strategies and be really intentional about that. So from the 90s through 2030, we're seeing how that segment of our workforce, the 55 plus population, is making up a larger and larger percentage of our labor force. We know that that's going to continue to grow, and again, just really underlining the point that if we don't think critically about strategies to engage experienced workers and to keep experienced workers, then we will not meet our economic goals as a state.
I don't know if BLS released some data recently, and the Washington Post covered it, but especially it's not on here, but in 2021, the workforce population, age demographic 40 to 60, actually has increased. Where we have seen a decrease in workforce participation or labor force participation is 60 and older. So older workers that are beyond 60 are leaving more than they were pre-pandemic. The only other age demographic that we see a decrease in workforce or labor force participation is 20 to 24. And so there's something going on where young adults, 20 to 24, are not participating at the level they were pre-pandemic in the workforce. And older workers, 60 and older, are leaving and not participating as much as they were pre-pandemic. So just adding some detail there.
Yeah, and as we look, again, across the U.S. and in Colorado, as Governor Polis shared, we have far more jobs than people to do those jobs. And so engaging every single segment of our workforce and those that have not been engaged will be critical to whether or not we actually have the talent in place that businesses need and that will allow our economy to continue to grow. So this is depicting some of what Joe was talking about, where looking at different points in Colorado's history, 2010, 2019, and then throughout the pandemic, the labor force participation by age group. So we're seeing that post or in the pandemic that 65 plus had a lower participation coming out of that as we saw those decreases. And so I think many of us are concerned about all of these issues and the barriers that we're going to talk about, how CDLE and the Workforce Development Council are addressing these. But we know that the pandemic had an outsized impact on our experienced workforce, that coming out of the pandemic, workers continue to experience ageism. And I think the digital divide, while real for every generation, every age group, is often associated more with our experienced workers who are as part of, I think, the ageism that exists in our society. So as we come out of the pandemic, what we're really trying to focus on are the key supports that we can provide to ensure that we're engaging older workers in the workforce, but also that we're shifting the mindset of employers who are challenged by skills gaps and challenges with hiring, when in reality we have untapped potential that can benefit the economy and the workforce and employers across the state. So we'll talk a little bit about this in the panel, but really thinking about apprenticeships and the earn and learn models that allow us to both engage the existing workforce and bring new talent in transition industries, looking at the digital divide, especially as technology continues to change and the half-life of every tech skill is about 5 years. We all have to keep learning. We all have to keep building our digital skills. And to act as if it's one portion of our population is sort of ignoring the reality of the advances. And then how do we engage our workforce and professional partners to make sure that they're tapping in and strategizing and using creative problem solving to think differently about hiring and engaging the workforce. So
I was glad to hear Carrie mention returnships, because I think a lot of people think of apprenticeships as just for young people. But if you think about it, the governor mentioned if you leave a career and you want to do something else, and returnships, apprenticeships are available for mid-career professionals and older workers. And the growth in apprenticeships, Catherine can talk to this in detail since she's the director of the State Apprenticeship Agency, the growth in registered apprenticeships have been in the professional series. So finance, accounting, healthcare, education, behavioral health, IT. That's where apprenticeship registrations are growing. So there's opportunity for people who are leaving careers in business administration or the professional series can enter into an apprenticeship if that's appropriate. I think we need to get out of the model where you have to stop working in order to gain a skill or competency. And through apprenticeship programs, returnships, that's one way to do it, where we don't ask people in the middle of their career, the middle of their life, or somewhere after that, to stop earning money and stop paying their bills to upskill so that they can stay employed. And so that's one great way that we can utilize mature workers to stay in the workforce, is create more apprenticeship programs for them.
I think that covers it with our spiel before we get into
actually, let's just follow up on the apprenticeship side of the equation, because I know, Catherine, you're doing a lot on the registration side. And I was actually looking at some data from the Center for Workplace Inclusion, and they say that 3.3% of apprenticeships are filled by 50 plus. What kinds of things are you all able to do to really elevate the opportunity for older adults and to really flag that for employers? I'm going to throw in one more piece, too, because I watched a PBS special that talked about train manufacturing. Train manufacturing, the one that makes the air conditioning, that kind of, and they actually said they were hiring people at 50 plus and found they stayed there 15 years, even in apprenticeship programs, and just wonderful relationship. And he said, I'm not doing this to be nice. This is not me being a nice guy. This is driving the bottom line of the company and delivering value to the employee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, so we have a ton of work to do to make apprenticeships more accessible for different age groups, different populations. We also are working to diversify the industries in which you can do an apprenticeship, as Joe mentioned. In Colorado, apprenticeships make up about 0.2% of our entire employed workers, so we have a lot to do to grow apprenticeships in general, and that's the work of the State Apprenticeship Agency. If you're not familiar with the registered apprenticeship model, this is a model for workforce development that's actually regulated by the U.S. Department of Labor, and we're in the process as a state of transitioning that to being regulated by the state and the Office of the Future of Work. So we have this unique opportunity to think about how we make it a less bureaucratic experience and a better experience for employers who are interested in really designing the development, the skill development and talent development that they need for the specific jobs at hand. I think apprenticeships are uniquely exciting for more experienced workers because there's so many ways in which you can engage an experienced worker in an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship requires that an individual learns in the classroom as well as on the job. It requires that an individual has a mentor in the workplace, and it takes 1 to 2 years depending on the nature of the skills they're developing and the occupation where they're being employed. So you can have an apprenticeship in a small business that's run by an experienced worker. You can engage your existing workforce in a new way to mentor incoming workers of any age, and then you can also have older workers participate in apprenticeships as a way to transition industries or try something new. So we are working to make apprenticeships more part of our way of talking about workforce development. I think there's a lot of myths about apprenticeship, and it's not, people might associate it more with skilled trades, and so we're working to raise awareness that pretty much any occupation you can think of, you can find an apprenticeship in or build an apprenticeship program. So we want to make that a way to build talent for each employer, and then figuring out the supports we need and the partnerships we need to actually bring workers of all kinds into apprenticeship versus our traditional ways of recruiting for those. So a lot of work to be done. I'm excited for this conference and to potentially partner with more of you to think about how an apprenticeship might meet your needs, and or how we leverage experienced workers in the existing apprenticeships that we have available.
Great, thank you. You know, there's another initiative you all are working on that I became familiar by attending a CWDC meeting, and it's called the Job Quality Initiative. You know, as I thought about job quality, and you can describe a little bit more to the audience what that means, I really felt like there's some real value for the mature worker. And can you draw that connection, help people understand what that program is and how it might benefit the older worker?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Colorado Workforce Development Council, which is our state workforce board, our colleague is unfortunately sick and couldn't join us today, so we'll do our best to represent their work, but I'm happy to connect people afterward as well. They've released a job quality framework because what we know is that job quality is not just one thing, it's a combination of factors that make a employment opportunity accessible. So what we are looking to do as an agency and as a state is to promote those employers that are investing in job quality, which includes access to various types of benefits, flexible scheduling, livable wages, and other supportive services and wraparound services that make work feasible for people. And so right now there's an opportunity for employers to participate in a job quality pilot to learn and get trained on this job quality framework and how they might move along a continuum to make their jobs higher quality. And I think the more we can promote those employers that are really making those investments in job quality, those are ways we can connect more people into employment that is actually self-sustaining. So we have a pilot going on with an organization called Working Metrics, which is a workforce analytics company. And it actually allows employers to measure the quality of their jobs based on these factors, and then to go through a process of identifying the right intervention for their type of business so that they can make the changes and make their jobs higher quality, and then we can promote those employers. So I think job quality benefits everyone, and transparency around the different benefits that are available, especially retirement benefits and flexible ways of working as people have various caregiving needs, are all part of the equation to make it more feasible and accessible for older workers.
And I think it's a relatively new initiative, isn't it, across the U.S.? I mean, so with Colorado leading the pack
Very
in
much
this,
so, yeah.
in this area. Actually, Rick, I was thinking it'd be interesting to do an analysis of job quality relative to tenure with a company, performance, profitability, et cetera. Is there a correlation and tie it with age, potentially, as well?
Well, and I think it's one of the ways we can bring industry employers to the table to say, we know you're struggling to find a workforce, but if your jobs were quality jobs and had these elements, you would be attractive to more workers and retain more workers. So it's not just good for the worker, it's good for businesses and industries as they figure out, how am I different? How am I competing a little bit higher than all the other companies in my industry because I offer these things as part of my worker package?
Right, and I think in the job quality arena, we're really talking about full-time employment, not applying this to the gig world, right? This is purely, really that traditional employment opportunity. Yeah. You know, the governor touched a little bit on the skill-based hiring, and Joe, you touched on that. I'd be curious to know, how receptive are you finding employers to this concept, and are you seeing them apply this across the age spectrum for their hiring? So it's moving away from, you know, Karen, you're applying for this job, you've got to have that bachelor's, you've got to have that master's, et cetera. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Right. I think we continue to see more industries and employers looking at this as they look for meeting the needs of their workforce shortages. And so the timing, you know, is really good for this agenda because the traditional pipeline flows are not there. We have people who are choosing not to go to college. We have people who are choosing to be gig workers and saying, I'm not going to work for one company. You know, when I grew up, maybe you had 6 jobs in your lifetime. There are young people in this generation or in the world today that say, I'm going to have 6 jobs at one time. And that's how I'm going to make my living. I don't want to be tied to one employer. So we have all those going on. But I think, you know, to the point Carrie was making earlier this morning, you know, the skills and competencies you obtain through one job or 6 jobs when you get to be 50 or 60, those are the things that you need to carry in your back pocket always, because those are the things that are going to make you more than relevant to the jobs of today. And so those are your advantages in competing for work as an older worker. And so skills and competencies, employers are moving towards what is the job requirement and how do I get a person who has those skills and competencies. So you need to find ways to make those relevant in your resume, in your LinkedIn profile, in your interview, that you're making a connection. And it may not be all of them, but it could be a good portion of them if you really knew what those skills and competencies are that you've obtained through your work in an industry, your work as a homemaker. Those are the things that are important and will drive the landscape of employment, I believe, over the next decade. Those are going to be so critical because this imbalance between young people and older people in the workforce. I think it's a great time to be aging in Colorado and wanting to stay in the workforce. There's a lot of opportunity to stay in the industry you have been, or like someone who's 20 doing in job shifting, to try something if you have confidence in the competence and skills you have as an older worker. Because employees from finance to cybersecurity to the healthcare industry, education, are looking for those skills. So I do think it was slow to uptick when we were pre-pandemic, but because of the world we live in today, I think employers are finally making changes to how they're looking at the artificial proxies they put in front of people at the gate. It's also very helpful with our equity agenda. It really opens up the door for the diversification, not only with people of color, ethnicity, but with ageism as well. We need to make sure that there's accessibility for people with disability. Remote work also helps, but I think it's a great opportunity for people who feel that they can't compete to really talk to a career coach. We're both career coach advocates, and so you can get access to a career coach at any of the 54 Colorado workforce centers throughout the state at no cost that can help you assess your career and put you on a trajectory on industries that are growing if you need to go to work. So, and I think I went around your question, but
you got there. You got there.
The governor talked about the mandate we have in state government as a model employer. We also have that same mandate to increase the utilization of registered apprenticeships as a part of our talent pipeline solution.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I think that with skills-based hiring, with work-based learning, the entire idea is that you're being very intentional about the specific skills that are actually needed to do the job. And I think for a long time, we haven't had to be that intentional. You can use that same professional development opportunity, or the professional development, the same PD, the position description in your workforce, in your workplace, and you kind of repurpose those things. When in reality, those skills and those needs are changing, and different people have those different assets. So the more we can get employers to think about skills specifically, and then update those as those needs change, and the more we as individuals can talk about our skills, our human skills, our digital skills, the way we can work in a specific occupation, the better we'll all be served, because you can actually do that matchmaking versus assuming, yeah, someone has a bachelor's degree, so they probably have a good work ethic. I know many people I got a bachelor's degree with who I don't think have a good work ethic. So I think it's just a matter of challenging the assumptions, being very intentional and specific. And because of the labor market we're in now, there's this unique opportunity to have employers be at the table to think differently about how they're hiring.
And you know, Catherine, I'm thinking back to when we first met, and you were actually just appointed to the Office of the Future of Work. And for those of you who don't know, I think we were one of the first 3 or 4 states to actually create such an office. And when that office was created, there were 5 different categories of employees that were really on the front and center. And 3 of those were the mid-career worker, 1 was the boomer population, and those people who were disabled. And when I think of the older population, that's 60% of those people that were represented. So all of that work of the Office of the Future of Work is being carried over into all of your work today, correct? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you've heard me do my spiel before, I often talk about the way we treat our older workers, the experiences we create for our older workers is literally our own future of work. And so if we ignore that, we're really setting our own selves up for failure, because we're going to be entering into an environment where there's ageism, where our skills aren't valued, where we're seen as not able to compete. And so the more we can create that environment now, the better it'll be for me, the better it'll be for everyone.
Karen, we do have time for questions. I see someone trying to raise their hand, but we'll get to those.
Wait, in just a minute. Yeah, we'll have a few minutes to answer questions. So there are a couple. I try to think of very unique programs for the for the 50 plus. And Joe, you and I have had this conversation before. Several of the workforce centers have the Back to Work 50 plus program. Is that something that's adopted by each workforce center themselves? Can either one of you talk a little bit about that? And I know I have somebody in the audience I'm going to refer to here in a minute.
Sure. I think it's the workforce boards, we have 10 of them across the state, make decisions on how they spend their resources in their communities. And so we have 2, the Denver workforce region and the Arapahoe-Douglas workforce region, that have very active Back to Work 50 plus programs and have been partners with the AARP Foundation for many, many decades. In the early part of this decade, when I was at Arapahoe-Douglas Works, we started Generations at Work. I think the first name was 50 Plus and Fabulous. It was a resource center for older, mature workers. So those commitments from those workforce boards to value the older worker and to create opportunities for people to work in their communities is something that is out there, and I think it is growing. I think career coaching has a universal approach to work with career seekers. If you're in school, out of school, mid-career professional, or at the end of the career. When I started with the 50 Plus and Fabulous Center, it was more for retirees who just wanted to volunteer, as the governor has mentioned. It wasn't because they wanted to work or needed to work. It's slowly transitioned while I was still there in 2010, 2012, to the need to work, to cover medical costs, cover prescriptions, to cover the cost of living. And so no matter why older workers want to stay in the workforce, I think we can accommodate part-time work, full-time work, career shifts, if you want to do something completely different. Those are tools of the Back to Work 50 Plus programs, or the resource centers that call it workforce centers. But part of the workforce commitment at the local level is to meet those most disenfranchised or most need of integration into the world of work. And so it's really at the local workforce board where there's awareness to create programming for older workers. I can tell you right now there's $64 million out in the system through House Bill 1264, which is stimulus money that's called RUN, Reskill, Upskill, Next Skill. Anyone who wants a skill that's an in-demand occupation in your community, those funds are available. Some of those are apprenticeship programs, some of those are on-the-job training, some of those are classrooms certifications. So anyone, no matter what their age is, those resources are there in the community at no cost that you can use a community college or an experiential learning program. There's also money available to help in the healthcare sector. Several community colleges are offering at no cost industry-recognized certifications to help the shortage we're having in the healthcare sector. There are a lot of resources, so if financial reasons are keeping you out of reskilling, upskilling, or next skilling, there shouldn't be that financial excuse right now.
Right. And I would just add the Back to Work 50 Plus, again, it is a program of AARP, the foundation, and I know that Mesa County also has a program, and right. I believe that Larimer has a program. But I'm mentioning this specifically because Teresa Fallagrady is here today from DEDO, the Denver Economic Opportunity Development Program, and we're often asked, where can I go find a 50-plus employee? For any of those employers here today, Teresa has more than 150 older adults who have been through this program and are looking for work. So I would encourage you to touch base with her. And, as well, I'd be glad to give you the contacts of the other workforce centers who also have talented individuals looking for employment. I think the last thing, I think that we're actually at 30 minutes, but I have just a closing comment. And I want to thank Joe and Catherine for participating on the panel, and Jarrett. Through their help, Brian and I and the Age Inclusive Management Strategies Program had the opportunity to meet with the head of HR for the state of Colorado. So we actually had the opportunity to walk through our program, talking about what is the state doing, where are the avenues that we could pursue change. And we were actually astounded, and I would say any reporter here, this is a story. You should be talking to the director of the state HR program because they are doing amazing things in state government to be the model for employers as to what can be done to really help employees as they mature in the workforce. As we spoke with the HR director, she explained to us, more than a third of our older employees, or of our employee base, could be leaving, could be retiring. We've kept that down to 10% retirement. Now, how do you keep it down to 10% if a third of those people could be retiring? You've obviously figured out a way to respect, communicate, and meet their needs front and center so that they continue working for the state, delivering value. The other thing that the state has done, again, a role model, they are the first state in the nation to sign the AARP pledge for the entire HR department. So thank you so much to you both for being panel members. I think we do have a few minutes for questions. Yes, and you've been patiently waiting.
Right behind.
My wife is speech impaired, so she wants me to ask you something. This is Cheryl Garcia, and she said, as we get more vintage, we might need an accommodation. What do you recommend to handle job accommodation requests?
That's a great question, and I think that's part, again, as we look at making sure that our employers in our communities, government included, are welcoming to all people that are making applications to their jobs. Accommodations, for the most part, are very easily met. We just need to create an environment where they're welcome and there's no retaliation, or you're not afraid to let that happen. The state of the Department of Labor and Employment, we're operating a pilot with disability hiring preference. And so when someone applies for a job and they feel comfortable to disclose that they have a disability, they get extra points to help them get to the top tier candidate levels. We are a pilot in that. If it goes well, it will be expanded to the entire state government. But it's things like that that really make us an employer that says, hey, they want me to work for them, and they're willing to work with me, and my authentic self when I make an application for employment. So that's one way that we're trying to make a more inclusive and accessible environment to the State Department. And I know many employers are doing that as well. Sharon from our Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is here and can talk to you more about the disability hiring preference at CDLE.
I used to be a contractor.
For DVR? Oh, good.
I was just testing you.
Well,
Thank you.
I hope that I passed, and that test was pretty easy, so.
Thank you for that. We have one more question back. Yeah. Microphone headed your way. And as she's bringing the microphone, I just want to remind people of what the vision of the Colorado Workforce Development Council, and I assume CDLE is that every Colorado employer will have access to a skilled workforce, and that every Coloradan has the opportunity for meaningful employment resulting in individual and statewide prosperity. So to me, that covers all ages, and I just love everything about that vision. Yes, your question.
Hi, yes. I work with the City and County of Denver in talent acquisition, and you mentioned the apprenticeship program and kind of what you're working on with that. So I'd love to get to know more information around that, something we're definitely interested in looking into as it relates to specifically kind of the trades positions. So where could I find more information on that?
You can email apprenticeship@state.co.us, or I can give you my card after, and we can set up time to talk. And I offer that to anyone. We have resources to a specialist team that works with employers to figure out if an apprenticeship is the right fit, if there's an intermediary to connect with. And I would say Dido and the Workforce Center there, they've been amazing ambassadors for apprenticeship too. So we might even be referring you to your own folks to help set that up. But happy to talk further.
And I think right now there is incentives because we do want to grow apprenticeships in the state of Colorado, not just state government. But there's incentives, and I believe there are 3,000 to 5,000 per program to help employers get these set up so that there's not a financial barrier to creating another talent pipeline for your overall strategy. So I would ask about those.
And I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much.
Sharon, thank you. And I know it's Older Americans Work Week as part of National Workforce Development Month. So just want to thank you for the work you do with your organizations, your businesses, or if you're an older worker yourself. It's so important that we create communities that are inclusive and that we have an opportunity for people to demonstrate their full potential no matter what age they are. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.